Hello, everybody, and good Monday morning. I am Angie Callen, your host of the No More Mondays podcast, where we believe you can have a thriving career or business and an amazing life on your terms. And I get to talk to amazing people who are doing just that, but taking it a step further to bring you amazing strategies and stories that help you live and work authentically. I am very excited about today's guest because we crossed paths during our ICF training journey. And since then, I have been able to watch him take his work, his voice, and his impact to a whole new level. And we're going to talk about it today. Quinn Harwood is the founder of GrowthTime. He's a leadership and performance coach and the author of a brand new coaching fable, also called GrowthTime. It's a guide to unlocking your purpose and leading with bold confidence to create meaningful impact. No wonder he and I got along immediately, right? Today, we are taking that conversation beyond just the leadership and high performance applicability of it, but talking about what happens when we finally start breaking our belief barriers and changing the stories that we tell ourselves to stop holding us back. Are you living and telling your most powerful story? We're about to find out. Quinn Harwood, welcome to No More Mondays.
Oh, Angie, it's great to be on. I've enjoyed our journey years ago, a year and a half ago, going through that program at ICF. And I love your passion. I love what you're doing. I think it's great, the Sunday Scaries. And I think it's ironic because I write a column called Monday Movers Mindset. So while you accomplish Sundays, I'm there on Monday Movers Mindset. And I'm excited to be with you today and chat it up.
You know what's funny? I get that email every Monday morning, and I'm like, this is just the perfect follow-up to the Sunday Scaries. And so again, why this conversation is probably a little overdue, but as timely as it's supposed to be, because teaser, we were going to do this maybe last summer, but I'm actually excited that we now get to do this and get to talk a little bit about the book. But I think it would be awesome to give everybody a little bit of context. So before we get to GrowthTime, both the framework and the book, I want to learn a little bit more about you and your backstory and kind of what brought you into this kind of transformational work, because typically we've gone through something like this ourselves that gives us the hindsight. So talk to me a little bit more about your experience, feeling stuck and realizing it was time for a shift.
Yeah, Angie, it's interesting. How do you get better at something? How do you become an expert? The reality is there's a lot of knowledge, but it's always the school of hard knocks. And so often when we get through that hard school of knocks and realize that life is a contact sport, we can exhibit some growth. We can get past our own mindset, our own stories, and really get moved into a future or mission that fulfills us, that empowers us. So really my journey, like my personal growth journey, because at the heart of GrowthTime, it is about personal and professional development. It really was a catalyst in my early 20s. And so I was playing professional basketball. At the time, I graduated Division I basketball player, playing professional basketball. And I had a contract with the Clippers. And I was so excited. I wasn't like this high profile athlete, but yet I was that person who was determined to make it to the top. Well, the cool thing is when I got there, things crashed. And so it was at the time I had signed a contract with the Clippers. I go to camp, and 4 days into practice, I blow up my ankle. And all of a sudden it's just like, wow, you're so close to your dream. And bam, it just, tubes and crashes. And so at the time I was still trying to figure out me. I'm in my early 20s. And I'm trying to figure out my story, how I want to approach life. I'm really focused on me, though, is really the central point. What was going to be good for me? How was I going to achieve success? How was I going to make $5 million? How was I going to get the fame and the glory? How was I going to make a name for myself on this earth, so to speak? And it's interesting because we start off with a lot of ambition. And then really what happened through a couple-year journey, I went through one injury after another. So I broke through the story of belief barriers that can't come back, can't overcome this. Tore up some ankles, tore up some knees, and just had that continual journey, that continual story. But in that, Angie, it was like, okay, how do I shift the way I believe and how do I shift my mindset in order to accomplish something more? And sometimes it's just how to live healthy and whole and not necessarily achieve this great end result. And so I would say there was a transformational period in my early 20s, and I would completely share that faith was a big part of that journey. And so in my journey, my relationship with God and religion was disconnected, very much so. Didn't grow up with a strong space, but in my 20s became real, and that became transformational. I would say that would be a catalyst to personal growth that really began to transform my life. But really, the story from there, Angie, is after sports and athletics, I got involved in the corporate world. I worked for a group called 24-Hour Fitness. And after I kind of figured out and grew through my personal growth journey and continued that pathway, I fell in love with business and I fell in love with sales. Got into the sales world, became a top sales leader at 24-Hour Fitness, and got into then building leadership and leadership teams and became a multi-unit level manager and ran markets and territories. But really where I got into coaching, and this is more the transformational part, was COVID. So COVID 2020 was just this catastrophic crisis in my life. So I went through not just the aura of COVID, but I went through my career, like almost 20 years now in this leadership performing job. And like the company went BK and they limited my role. And I'm sitting there like in the COVID, like, wow, I got this phone call and we're like, hey, after 20 years, everything you've done is done and it's over. At the same time, I was going through a very personal crisis, like going through a family crisis. The breakup of a family, which that was extremely brutal on me and what it meant. And so in that journey, I worked with a coach. And I worked with a coach, Angie, and I got this notion of what that would look like. And we began to explore mission. We began to explore values. We began to explore what was possible and what was next. And amazingly enough, that's where life coaching came to me. And it took advantage of all these life experience of personal growth I had to overcome obstacles and barriers, took all the experience of leadership to build high performance teams. And boom, I started off on it. I just hit the ground running. And that was in summer of 2020. And that's where kind of GrowthTime was born. So it was born out of pain. It was born out of taking a risk and working with a coach. And I got to say, it's definitely took the space of occupying my time and faith with God that kind of directed this path. And I got into it, Angie. Now that's a long answer, but hopefully that gave some good backdrop.
We're going to dig into many aspects of that. One, happy 5-year anniversary, because statistically speaking, you're way defying those odds. But what I think is so interesting is the professional athlete story, foundational component of this is really interesting to me because I think it is such an acute example of a very defined, assumed career path that does take a ton of discipline, a ton of determination until all of a sudden it's stripped away from you, and you don't have control kind of over that. And having to hard pivot, but still with that same drive and determination until we get to a point in society and in our existence as a world where the factors that we can't control again start making us think, right? The pandemic and the existential crisis of whoa, this world is changing at a big historic level. Do I want to keep doing the same thing? Do I want to keep on the same path? And I was a few years into business in the career coaching space at that point. I saw this story a lot, Q, that where it was like, holy crap, the world is going to end. I better do something more meaningful and more, more intentional with it. And the point I want to make to kind of bring us there is that the journey got you to that point. And I find that coaching is something that if we're really called and meant to do, we arrive at, and all of a sudden it's the click because we have that journey behind us to inform how we coach through people through something similar. And it sounds like you kind of had that same experience.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the age of information and there's lots of it, right? I mean, how many people scroll 15 hours a day? Too much, right? That's a Sunday scary right there. You're getting blown up with all this information. But in all that noise and all that confusion, clearing through it is the hard part we do as people. And it's the hard part we do as coaches. I mean, some of the most unexplored territory and uncharted space in this world is people, is us. And so
we are the best and most complex, interesting, messy problems to solve.
We're the scary Sundays. But in that, how you navigate that and how you get through that journey is so pivotal. And I find that it's quite common. Most of what I do as a coach is try to connect with that next generation. And that's really what GrowthTime, the book, the message, the resource is about, is helping that next generation, that Gen Z millennial, young business professional, get through that noise, get through that confusion and say, hey, here are the core lessons you're going to need to grow through in order to live your best life in leadership. And so it's been a journey for me through that and my personal and those hard knocks life hits and how to overcome. In the age of information, you want to take that and streamline it. So if your impact is making that next generation an easier, clear path up the mountain, well, God bless it. Let's do it. Let's make it easy for somebody, because it may have been hard for me. But that, giving it back and paying it back is really the joy.
You bring up an interesting point that, we could debate generational differences all day long, and I enjoy the opportunity to do so. However, there's a rabbit hole we won't go down today. I do think you bring up a good point with the information age substantially changing how we identify with ourselves, and kind of how we speak to ourselves, the amount of competition and comparison that we see, and all of that noise. In a way, I'm fortunate to have bridged the gap between analog and digital as an adult who was kind of already discovering myself. And I think it's harder to do that with all of these things kind of in your face as a young professional, as a young business owner, which brings me back to a term that you said earlier and I want to talk about, which is this belief barriers. So I'm wondering how tell us what that means. And also, how does somebody out there start kind of maybe identifying some of those things that are maybe more belief barriers than useful beliefs?
Yeah. So, the belief barriers really starts with our mind and the stories we're telling. And sometimes they're so interwoven, we can't even recognize when there's a barrier from us trying to achieve or accomplish or move forward in a powerful way. And so when you think about beliefs in general, I've kind of broken it down. And in part of Growth Time, there's a section called the power of beliefs. And really, it's about understanding the power of your beliefs that will move you forward. In essence, it's a hard stance, but you die in the wilderness. If part of your journey is to reach your potential and reach your fulfillment and your purpose here on earth, you're going to face belief barriers. And really, the ones are fear. That's always going to be your number one. And the second is going to be self-doubt. And the third one's actually, like I kind of coined it, dependent trust, because we get very dependent on trusting ourselves. And that becomes an oxymoron, because we're so taught to be intended, be accomplished. And I grew up in a culture and a fatherhood where it's like, you figure it out on your own, boy. Like, you get her done and you figure it out. And there's some strength to being independent, but when you're fully just independent and dependent upon yourself, you don't accomplish as much. So you learn that in team sports, and you can learn that in life. But I see those belief barriers, the threads of those existing in, the thousands of coaching sessions I've done. Really, when people are trying to move a mission forward, whether that's life, relationship, business, career, there's going to be a belief barrier. And some of the things you could hear is, I can't, or it's not the right timing, or I don't have enough, or it's not really possible, or I didn't feel like I can do that, or hey, I was told this story that I'm not enough, I'm not worthy, I'm not able to. And so all these little subtle little stories become these barriers then. And then when you can peel them back, ultimately you find like, wow, what's behind that? Like a real concrete example, right? I do life coaching, leadership, and business coaching. So I'm coaching this business owner, strong-minded, tough, determined person, lover. But in that, she had to make some really bold decisions in her business. And as we coached through it, it wasn't all the tactics and strategies that would help drive her business. It was really the undercurrent. There's a belief barrier that existed. Yep. And when she finally was able to see it and we brought it up, she stopped in her tracks and she goes, I'm just afraid. I can't believe that. I didn't think fear was my barrier. I'm afraid to make these decisions. And she was so enlightened or illuminated that she now could see clearly what that belief barrier was for her to make the decision to move her mission and her business forward. So that's just trying to give you a tangible space on what you see as a coach, and then helping people break through it is just like that aha moment. It's just like, man, it changed the whole course of her business and her leadership. So that stuff's powerful, Angie. I get excited. I get fired up about that stuff.
Well, that's why we do what we do. Awareness alone is a very, very powerful thing. How often have we heard that even in not to go there, but like the AA world, right? First thing to, fixing a problem is admitting you have one. And I think in these situations, we lack awareness to the fact that we have carried belief systems, whether they are imposed upon us at a young age, or whether we develop them through our own experiences and the stories those create. We take belief systems through our entire lives. Most people, and this is where you just got Coach Q and Angie on a soapbox together, and I didn't even plan on this, but we take this belief system through life without either ever being aware of it, or maybe we're aware of it, but don't believe we have the power or the permission to question it.
Absolutely. Like the number one thing we learn is awareness and personal growth. anything is the awareness of it. And to do that, we have to be real with ourselves. We can't lie to ourselves. We can't be willing to discount there might be some change involved with what we're going to come to, the conclusion we're going to come to. We can't be afraid of the growth. We can't be afraid of growth in that space. But it is an interesting paradigm, like how you move past those barriers. But the other side is filled with purpose. The other side's filled with the joy. It's filled with confidence. And that's what people want. They want that joy. They want the confidence. They want the empowerment. And it's some of those missing links that just can't be found by sipping martinis on the beach, right? It's not all in that. That's fun, but it's not all in that.
I mean, there's nothing wrong with that every once in a while, but that's very, very true. I don't know why, for some reason, this, you said something a minute ago that made me think about if you want to go fast, you go alone. And if you want to go far, you go together, which maybe is our commercial to get a coach. But ultimately, it's this idea of allowing yourself inner exploration, because I think we're also very good at maybe knowing there's more, but finding every excuse, belief barrier on the planet to stay small. And so what I want to do is, somebody out there in the last 3 minutes just went, darn it, these two people are talking to me. So what do we want to say to them? So let's say maybe there's somebody out there, they're like, yeah, I know these two are talking to me. I'm meant for more. I just don't know where to get started with figuring out what's in the way. What do we say to them?
I think the acknowledgement that if you're at that turning point right now, that you feel something's in the way, there's something in the barrier, it could be circulating. The biggest encouragement I can give is start by writing. It's funny because we have a lot of clutter in our minds. We have definitely heavy hearts, and to get it out in front of us begins to make it more visible. So some of the powerful tools you use in coaching is let's get out in front of us. If we're willing to get out in front and bring exposure, then we can bring healing. If we're willing to get out in front and bring exposure, we can bring power. If we're willing to get out of the dark and into light, we can move forward to a meaningful, future. So I think the step comes with, like, whatever those thoughts are, journal them out. Don't be afraid of them. Don't be afraid of what you might write down. Be real, candid, and honest about what you write down, about what you're thinking, what barriers may exist, or why you haven't really done this. And write out the story. I went through this coaching exercise with someone not too long ago, and it was the journey of, hey, tell me your story. Tell me exactly the story you're saying. And we coached a lot of different questions through, and he got the whole story out. And it was great. I said, and as they coached it, I said, can you write some of that down? Can you write some of that thought down, that story you're telling yourself? And then as we navigated, I said, okay, what would a different story look like? If you weren't living your own story and you're really trying to inspire and move a different story, what possible story could come out of it? And then they were obligated to take themselves out of the role that they occupied and then begin to think through, hey, this is what a story would look like. This is how my thoughts could be different. This is what would be possible. This is what would be potential if my story was different. And really that became the journey with it, Angie. And then having them feel the emotions. How did that feel with the story you told? And oftentimes it's amazing because as they start to craft a new story, their face lightens up, their emotions shift, they're engaged. And all of a sudden, it's this world of possibilities that opens up. It's like, bang, okay, let's charge that. Let's charge that story. And let's reinforce that so you can get past all that uncomfortable fear and anxiety and stress that's really kind of holding you back.
Mm-hmm. You can't change a script. You can't edit a script if you actually haven't written the first draft. And I think this is, and also notice, write, not type. Because there is still a strong psychological connection with the physical act of writing versus typing. And so there's a reason that we encourage that. And your hand will cramp in half a page because we don't write anything anymore. But this goes back to something you also said earlier, which is you fix the mind and everything else follows. And by the way, I should tell you, this is what it looks like when a biology major and an engineering major talk about mindset. This is so true because I attest that 80% of success in business or leadership or just about anywhere in life is 80% mindset. And then action is the antidote to the other 20% that kind of holds us back. And sometimes a very simple first action, like I'm going to write down the story I currently have so that I can assess whether or not I like it and choose where I want to change it. That's a very powerful action that you all out there can do right now.
Absolutely. I think about it, Angie, is one paradigm I coach to quite a bit and I have people navigate through is mindset changes behavior.
Mm-hmm.
And when you start to visualize any change you've made in life, whether it's physically, emotionally, relationally, spiritually, grow anything, is nothing shifted first until your mindset shifted. Then your
Yeah.
behavior followed. And when you navigate that paradigm, mindset changes behavior. Then you begin to make changes. And change is
Yep.
hard for all of us.
It is.
Change is very difficult.
We are
And
creatures of habit.
whew, we are. We
Yeah.
get locked in. And then the next layer I see to it, the equation is if mindset changes behavior, identity repeats behavior. So the things we fully identify with and are bonded to, we will repeat behavior based upon what we identify with. It begins though with mindset changing behavior. And if we can continue to change our mindset, we form an identity, like a stronghold, a healthy stronghold, let's call it. But it's a
Yeah.
healthy strength inside in our mind that becomes our identity. And then our behavior continues to repeat it. Like I'm a fitness advocate. I've been in it for years, but I still love fitness. I'm probably funny. I'm 50, but I think about myself as a professional athlete still, right? So my mindset is always going to dictate my behavior with that. But I've said that enough that I identify with that. I still believe when I train that my identity is I'm a fitness person. I'm a fitness enthusiast, and I challenge myself. And I'll always repeat that behavior now, because if I go a day or two without working out, it's like, okay, I can take time off, but I know that the core of me is that's what I have identified with, and in terms of the behavior, in terms of pattern. And so it gives the same way when you get to the details of relationship wise, spiritual wise, business wise, leadership wise. So I've seen that as a powerful, truism that works to help people navigate to be their best self.
Well, and it's a positive, proactive stance on something that could otherwise become self-deprecating in the very specific example of staying physically fit. But you said something that I wanted to talk about, because this is another thing we share, is working kind of at that intersection of life, leadership, and business. And how integration is kind of the key to success here. Because, literally there's a popular show out there called Severance. Newsflash, you just can't sever this stuff because it is all intertwined. I want to talk a little bit more about that and why working at that intersection of life, leadership, and business is so important to you.
It summarizes who we are as people. We're three-dimensional as a person, and I think our lives are three-dimensional. So meaning if we're body, soul, spirit, we're also life, leadership, and business. So business professionals, people that are out in the world, they have capacity to say, okay, I'm not just life and what goes on in my personal life and story and myself. I'm not just leadership about influencing, inspire others. And I'm not just about business, driving performance or goals. So there is an interlinking and they work together. I've noticed often, even though someone may connect with me to be a business coach for them, invariably, we're going to be coaching through leadership and we're going to be coaching through life. And I can see your big eyes light up and you know it. It links together. It links together because if they're not in harmony, they're not unified, two things happen. You don't drive the performance, the results you want, and then you're not fulfilled. I mean, there's plenty of people who are maybe living a good life, but they're not really mission minded and mission movers in their leadership or their business. And so they're not reaching their potential because they're not unified. You've got a lot of people in corporate roles and they're not supposed to be there. And then you got a lot of people who are entrepreneurs and they're not supposed to be there. And so getting that clarity of where your life and how you lead and influence others, they mesh together. And I could see you light up when I say that, because they're not independent. So severance, no, severance is not a reality.
No. It's a very popular show, but not a reality, and nothing AI is going to create for us anytime soon. And, ultimately, it's funny. In the early days of No More Mondays, I talked to more people who worked. Now I talk to more people who are helping people have less Mondays, right? But there was a commonality that came up that I think really supports what you just mentioned, and that's values alignment. And a lot of times we don't seek that in the three dimensions that we are. We just try to compartmentalize too much. And ultimately, that's where this idea of lack, we're less fulfilled. We haven't reached our purpose. We're not operating at our fullest potential when we are 4-letter F word fine. Yeah. It's just true. But I still attest, and this was the big seed that was planted in my 20s, Coach Q, was that we accept that 4-letter F word fine as the status quo, as the expectation, and we accept mediocrity because of it. And then that keeps us from doing the inner work to raise awareness around the belief. It's a giant, giant cycle, right? And you don't have to accept it anymore.
You can break through. You can live a more meaningful, purposeful life. You know, I think about it too, Angie, in line with what you're saying, is that you hear a lot out in the world is, man, I just want to be happy. I just want to be fulfilled. I just want to, you know, just be confident. And it's interesting, like fulfillment to a lot of people is a destination. Like it's not. Like what I've learned in my personal experience is it wasn't a rival that was going to fulfill me. It was the journey for fulfilled, that I'm living a purpose-filled life. I have a mission I'm pursuing. I know why I'm pursuing that mission. I've got values that are clearly defined that help me empower that mission. I'm already in the realm of fulfillment. I don't have to find it. I've got to walk in it. And walking in, what Growth Time talks about, the first section is the power of you, talks about being clear on your purpose plan. And that gets very clear on my why, my how, and my what. And so it kind of goes through that kind of umbrella. But that's what's needed out there. That's what people are looking for. And even though some of the Growth Time message, the book itself, is maybe for that next generation, you'd be amazed how many next level leaders, you'd be amazed at how executive, that man, like that foundational isn't still there. That is not as clear and strong in them. And so when that platform is not strong, they can't build a really fruitful tree to make the most impact they can. And then we'll start to fall off. So I've seen it in both realms.
Well, and very practically, that's more common than you would think for people who are mid-career, you know, let's say late 30s, early 40s, moving up a corporate ladder. That is the only way they've been given to grow. And so they kind of like, let's say, fail up rungs without ever being trained on how to build that foundation, because it isn't something that comes naturally themselves. And so now we're going back to try to build a stronger foundation under a house that already has people living in it. And so there's the very practical vocational application of this, but it spills over into life as well. And so this is, I wanted to talk about the book, and you took us there. How perfect. So talk to me a little bit more about Growth Time and the framework in it. You mentioned the kind of the first step of it, but I want to hear more.
Yeah, I'll say this, that the Growth Time journey and writing it, like when the vision and the mission came to me in 2020, it was a journey. I mean, I originally thought that I would be like internet, like, hey, how to write a book in 90 days. And I'm like, this is dope. I'll get it all done in 90 days. I'll crank this out. We're going to go charge. We're going to climb this mountain. Like, nah, that didn't work like that. And so the journey was quite the climb. And it was a 4-year process, working with a coach, working with an editor coach to get the message out. But it's really written in the form of a fable. And so it's personified through a person, a character named Peter. And, you know, Peter's journey really starts off, you know, in some semblance to my, say kind of a little bit of my story, but it's like, hey, he starts off as this professional athlete who's really trying to wrestle with himself. And I think that's really the stage we all go through in self-discovery. We wrestle, we battle with ourselves. We think we want certain things. We're not sure what they look like. We're not sure how to get them. And so what really is disturbed in that arena, and this is my personal experience too, is your confidence, your self-esteem, your self-worth, your value. All those things are at stake at that stage of our journey of life. And when they're dealt with or worked through or grown through, you start to embrace the power of you. And that's really kind of like, you know, say stop one on your climb up the mountain of Growth Time, the personal growth. And from there, it kind of navigates the reader through 3 kind of say fundamental growth zones. You know, the power of you, the power of beliefs. And the one I love, Angie, when it comes to life is the power of personal liberty.
Oh, okay. I want to hear more about that.
It was a transformational season in my life in my late 20s and early 30s in understanding personal liberty and personal freedom. And there's a terminology I use in there that's inherent to everybody. We get this because unfortunately we all walk through COVID about the virus, but there is a hypocrite monster that lives within all of us inherently. And the things we want to do, we don't do, and things we should do, we don't do. And we have these contradictions within that can shortchange our personal freedom. And so the power of personal liberty was a journey and a continual growth journey, but it walks the reader through, hey, how do I kind of self-manage myself to success? What are the arenas I need self-discipline in and personal growth in so I can manage me to success? And so I can learn to show up, let's call it. I can learn to show up well for me. I can learn to show up well for my family. I can learn to show up well for my relationships at work, for my mission. So I really love that, because there's a tremendous need when you get to the core of what people want. Happiness is like, I'll give you some ice cream if you want happiness. Okay. I'll take Ben and Jerry's personally. If you want to make me happy, Ben and Jerry's would make me very happy. It'll add some extra calories, but I'll take some. But like the journey of having a freedom to be your best and to show up with the best version of you, the best, what I call the God authentic you, the one God created you to be. There's a self-management process there that gets kind of scary and uncertain for a lot of people. But yeah, it's the pathway. It's the pathway to overcome. So I love that section of the book, and it was transformational for me, and it still is today. The cool thing, about coaching Angie is you can write, and I kind of brought it here as a thought. You can write something, but it doesn't matter if you don't live it. And so this is a template for me now to walk through too, as well, to be like, hey, this is my pathway to best life and leadership. I've got to live this out. Like, I don't get a hall pass because I wrote it. I've got to live it out. That's where the power comes, from the doing.
Action is the anecdote. I'm going to start writing about that. But there, I have told tons of all the people that are coming to me, Angie, I think I want to start coaching, but I don't know anything. And that's a belief barrier. And you dig into the story, and what you find is that they've gone through something, and all you have to do to support someone else through a thing is to be a half step ahead of them. But that goes back into this point of, you kind of have to walk the walk and be a living, breathing example of it. Both so that you can continue to have that empathy, but so that you also have the tools and the mindset. Because one of the best things that you've said in the last half hour is let go of the idea of getting to a destination and embrace a state of being. It's not a place, it's a way of being. And it's that internal, this idea of personal identity, personal liberty, I think is a great way to put it, because if you're satisfied with who you are, then you're fulfilled with where you are.
Yeah. And it's an interesting one too, Angie. Sometimes we think, if I let go, nothing's going to happen. If I let go, I'm going to release everything. But ultimately, if you let go, you feel more free to go do more. What I found out in my journey of personal growth is, when I was so self-reliant and the weight and the pressure was completely on me, all of a sudden it worked against me. It drove me to a certain level, but I can't go to where I want to go by doing what I've currently done. And self-reliance in that space was a barrier for me. And then learning to depend and trust in people, in God, in this story, it began to shift. And all of a sudden I let go, and it was like, wow, I'm more free to go be the best me. And I have more energy now. I have more life. I have more zest to go accomplish more. I don't feel like I have to be in control of everything. And that's a growth journey in of itself, what you help navigate people through.
It's amazing what happens when you just loosen the freaking grip, people. Just loosen the grip. Because a lot of that is trust in yourself, trust in God, trust in the, higher power that you identify with. But sometimes you got to let go and do the universe, or whatever title you would like to give it, do its thing. Yeah. Amen. We're preaching. We've talked about lots. We can pack a conversation, which I knew was going to be the case. How does everybody get more of your wisdom? So, we've talked about the book. I would love to shameless plug the heck out of it. So how do people find it, and how do people follow along with you and your continued journey?
Yeah. Easiest way is go hit up Amazon. On Amazon, GrowthTime is the name of the book. And the hashtag or the subtitle is The Clear Path to Your Best Life and Leadership. You can also find resources at my website, coachqharwood.com. You can find overviews, you can find resources. There's an online course there you can grab and take. There's even a GrowthTime journey that takes you through different segments of growing through life and leadership. It's a 1-year newsletter course, which is kind of unique. So it kind of takes you through a newsletter, kind of drips it through you week by week, and it takes you through the whole growth journey of growing through life and leadership. So you can find that at coachqharwood.com. The book at Amazon is going to be your overview. Like, if you're a young leader, if you're a young professional, if you're in your mid-journey of professionalism and you go, gosh, how do I really level up me and the people I lead? That GrowthTime's for you. Like, GrowthTime will help you as a person clear through the noise, I've had some cool stories of people going out and buying it for all their team they work for. Like they own businesses,
Yeah.
they bought it for everybody, and they grow together. And they get in this concept of growth time together. It's kind of funny, but that's why the clock's on the wall. It's a reminder that no matter what time or season you're in, it is always growth time, baby.
It's always
And so
growth time.
that's
I
it.
love
That's why the clock stays there. It's like a reminder that, hey, it's okay, it's safe, and we are into growth time. So that's how you could access that, through the website. Obviously, you can find me on Instagram or Facebook. They're all available. And then LinkedIn, of course, you can look up my profile, Quinn Harwood. So it's all there. Hope to make an impact to the next generation for sure.
We are everywhere and everywhere. So follow us everywhere and everywhere, because the big thing is the reason that Coach Q and I do the work that we do is so that you don't have to do this alone. I think in some way it might be, if I can ease the road of hard knocks 1% from what I experienced, then I want to do that. And the reason I bring these stories to all of you is, one, because of the power of stories, but two, because I want you to know there are resources out there. So reach out to us, because if you have been feeling stuck or unsure, or you're waiting for that perfect moment to get it all together, maybe what you really need to do is just take a little action, write the current story so that you can rewrite what you're telling yourself. Bring awareness to those belief barriers, because you don't have to wait to be ready. You just have to wait. You just have to be willing. And that is kind of what Coach Q and I are here to enable. So we want to challenge you to kind of take a small step, take a tiny action, put pen to paper, and then maybe make a bold move after that, because mindset and a little looser grip will change your entire world. And so as we wrap things up, let's give everybody one more piece of Coach Q wisdom on what's your number one suggestion for people who want to embrace this idea of like personal liberty, personal freedom, taking agency. Where do we begin?
Where do you start? Knowledge is key. And so there's a lot of noise out there. I'd highly encourage you. I mean, it's a plug with it, but the framework of it, grab the book. It's going to be a good starting point. There's a message and resources in there to help you navigate through your personal liberty and the growth through that. But it's going to start with knowledge, and it's going to help you get a clear path on these are the areas I really need my personal growth. It'll be reflective. It'll be powerful. But that's where I would start.
Yeah. Get to know yourself is a great suggestion. Build inner knowing. I love it. I'm going to ask all of you out there, what's a belief you've been carrying with you that is maybe time to ditch it? It's time to let it go. A story that you're ready to rewrite. I would love to hear it. I'm sure Coach Q wants to hear it. So reach out to us on LinkedIn, tag us in a post. We want to be part of your next chapter. And I am so appreciative of Coach Q being here to hopefully inspire it. So thank you so much for joining me on No More Mondays. This has been awesome. Once again, I am Angie Callen, and this is the No More Mondays podcast. One more huge thanks to Coach Q for bringing his wisdom, his fire, and his faith to today's conversation. If you are feeling ready for a new season of growth, whether it's on purpose or just because you know it's time, we just gave you a permission slip. I'll see you next week for another episode of No More Mondays podcast.